I was the photographer at a perfect wedding. Then my camera revealed a terrible secret. Welcome back with a new real shock story. Before we start, comment and tell me which city you're watching from. ATN, don't forget to subscribe and rate it from 0 to 10. Let's enjoy the story, everyone.
I had been photographing weddings for years, but that day felt different. There was a kind of electricity in the air I couldn't name, something invisible yet heavy, wrapping itself around every smile, every handshake, every flicker of light in the hall. I arrived early, as always, camera in hand, ready to capture the perfect moments. The venue sparkled with fresh flowers and warm golden lights, every detail arranged with meticulous care. The bride's dress flowed like a river of cream, and her eyes shone with a happiness that seemed unshakable. I thought, just for a moment, that perfection truly existed, that this was one of those rare days when everything in the world felt right. I smiled, adjusted my camera strap, and took my first shots. The guests arrived, laughter filling the air, glasses clinking, soft music hovering just beneath the hum of conversations. I moved among them like a shadow, invisible yet present, capturing smiles, stolen glances, and fleeting hands brushing together. Everything seemed ordinary, perfect, like a picture in a magazine. But then I noticed it something subtle, almost imperceptible. A movement in the corner of a frame, a glance exchanged that didn't belong. My chest tightened, but I shrugged it off. I'd learned to focus on the moment, not the shadows. Yet, a small voice in my mind whispered that maybe the camera was seeing what my eyes weren't. As I wandered through the crowd, snapping candids, I caught the father of the bride signing some papers at a side table. My shutter clicked instinctively, framing the moment. That's when it first hit me. There was something in the way he hesitated. Over his pen, a tension in his shoulders, a tightness in the jaw that didn't belong in this celebration. I zoomed in, curious, my professional instinct overriding my creeping unease. The image on my screen froze me. That signature, so ordinary at first glance, held a weight I couldn't explain. I felt a cold shiver crawl down my spine. Something wasn't right, and my camera had just confirmed it. I told myself I was imagining things. Weddings were stressful. People fidgeted and fretted over details, nothing more. I shook my head and lowered my camera, telling myself to focus on the happy moments. The bride twirling in her dress, the groom laughing with friends, the guests wiping tears from their eyes. But the unease clung to me like a shadow, and every shot I took seemed to carry a whisper of that first strange feeling. Every smile, every laugh, felt faintly hollow. I couldn't stop thinking about that signature, about the way the father's hand trembled ever so slightly, and I knew I had to look again, closer, through the lens of my own camera. I slipped away from the main crowd, ducking behind a pillar, and brought up the series of photos I'd just taken. The light shimmered off the screen, highlighting details I hadn't noticed in real time. The nervous glance toward someone off camera, the faint scowl hidden beneath a smile, a hand brushing over the papers as if hiding something. My breath caught in my throat. It was subtle, almost invisible, but my camera had captured it all. And then, I noticed the most terrifying thing: another figure in the background, half hidden behind a vase of flowers, watching, waiting, their face impossibly familiar. My stomach dropped. I blinked, convinced I was seeing things, yet the photo didn't lie. For a moment, I considered deleting the image, convincing myself I was overreacting, letting my imagination run wild. But the camera was relentless. It had seen everything, recorded it in perfect, unblinking detail. My hands shook as I scrolled through the shots again, heart hammering against my ribcage. Each photo seemed to whisper a secret, every frame revealing pieces of a puzzle I wasn't sure I wanted to solve. The room was still filled with laughter and chatter, but I felt as though I were floating above it all, watching the joy through a lens that showed me the cracks beneath the perfect surface. Then came the moment I couldn't ignore. I raised my camera to photograph a group of children playing near the reception table. The click echoed in my ears louder than usual, and when I reviewed the shot, my blood ran cold. There it was, hand, reaching for something, a face partially hidden, eyes darting nervously. And as I zoomed in, a realization struck me with the force of a hurricane. The person I had just photographed wasn't just any guest. They were connected to the documents the father had signed, connected to the secret that now felt impossibly heavy in the room. Every laugh, every cheer, every toast seemed like a carefully constructed performance, hiding something far darker than anyone suspected. I stepped back, feeling the weight of my own discovery press against my chest. My camera, usually my tool of joy, had become a window into a world I wasn't ready to face. I wanted to put it down, to pretend I hadn't seen anything, but the images refused to let me forget. Each frame demanded attention, demanded action. I realized that this wasn't just a wedding, not just a celebration, it was a stage, and I was the only one who had glimpsed the truth behind the curtain. As the music swelled and guests danced, I stayed in the shadows, heart racing, mind spinning. I had to capture more, had to understand what I was seeing, but every step forward felt like stepping deeper into danger. I couldn't tell anyone yet. Wrong word, the wrong glance, and the fragile balance could shatter completely. And then, as I raised my camera again to take another shot, I saw it, the exact moment that would change everything. The photograph that would expose the terrible secret lurking beneath the perfect smiles. My hands trembled, my pulse surged, and I realized there was no turning back. Every story I had ever photographed had ended with smiles, kisses, and tears of happiness. But this story, this was different. I was no longer just the observer. I was the witness, the keeper of a truth that no one else could see. The perfect wedding, the celebration of love, had hidden a shadow, and my camera had caught it all. And in that instant, I understood that life could be far more complicated than any photograph could ever capture. That, as I clicked the shutter one last time, capturing the final moments of that day, I knew nothing would ever be the same. The secret was now frozen in my camera, waiting for the world to see it, waiting for me to decide what to do next. The perfect wedding was over, but the story, the real story, was only beginning. The moment I put the camera down, I could feel the weight of what I had seen pressing on my chest like a lead blanket. My hands were still trembling, and my mind refused to slow down. I walked through the reception hall, pretending to adjust my camera, pretending to capture ordinary moments, while every nerve in my body screamed at me that nothing was ordinary anymore. Every laugh, every clink of a glass, every soft word exchanged between guests felt like a carefully scripted performance designed to hide something enormous. I tried to tell myself I was imagining it, that my imagination was running wild, but the evidence sat right there on my camera, staring back at me in sharp, unforgiving detail. I found a quiet corner near the desert table, pretending to photograph the intricate icing on the wedding cake, while secretly scrolling through the photos I had just taken. That's when I saw it again, something subtle, almost invisible in real time, but glaringly obvious in the images. A guest who had seemed perfectly ordinary had lingered near the father of the bride longer than anyone else. Their hands brushed together ever so slightly, and the movement, captured in multiple frames, hinted at secrecy, at a hidden exchange. My heart pounded. I tried to push it out of my mind, tried to convince myself that it wasn't my business, that I was just the photographer, not a detective. But deep down I knew that ignoring it would be impossible. I moved closer, camera raised as a shield, observing without being noticed. From my vantage point, I could see the way the father's expression changed when he looked up, sharp, almost imperceptible tension in his jaw, a quick glance toward the balcony where another guest had disappeared. It was subtle, fleeting, but I had seen enough to know that something about this wedding was not what it seemed. I captured it in silence, each click of the shutter like a heartbeat echoing the racing in my chest. Every photo was a fragment of a puzzle I wasn't sure I wanted to solve, yet I couldn't stop. Then I noticed the bride laughing with her friends, unaware of the subtle tension weaving through her father's movements. I felt a pang of guilt. Was I violating her joy? But the camera didn't lie. The shadow behind the celebration was too real, too heavy to ignore. My curiosity turned into something more urgent, something that pulled me forward even as fear curled around my spine. I moved closer to the side table where the documents had been signed, pretending to photograph the flower arrangements, while my eyes tracked every subtle gesture, every nervous glance. The camera zoomed in, and my stomach dropped. A faint slip of paper had fallen to the floor, almost invisible beneath the edge of the table. One of the guests quickly bent down and picked it up, sliding it into their pocket with a quick glance around the room. That movement, captured clearly in my lens, was enough to make my heart stop. Who was that, and what had they taken? I felt like I had stumbled into a story much bigger than a wedding, a story that could unravel lives if it ever got out. I decided I needed more proof, more clarity. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, to protect myself, but I couldn't. The camera in my hands was a window into something no one else could see. I adjusted my lens, blending into the background, capturing moments that seemed normal to everyone else. But in the photographs, were anything but. I saw fleeting expressions, subtle exchanges, whispers in corners, hurried steps that hinted at secrets too large to ignore. My heart raced faster with every frame I took, and I realized that the perfect wedding, the joyful celebration everyone saw, was merely a mask. Then came a moment that froze me in place. I was photographing the couple as they cut their cake. The bride smiling radiantly, the groom's hand gently resting on hers. Behind them, I caught a flash of something impossible, a look, a recognition in the eyes of the person who had taken the paper. And then, in the same frame, I saw the signature again, the one that had unnerved me earlier. My breath caught. I knew, deep in my bones, that I had stumbled on something no one wanted to be discovered. My pulse thundered in my ears, and I had to force myself to keep taking photos, to keep pretending that I was just doing my job. I edged closer to the side table once more, careful not to draw attention. The father of the bride glanced around nervously, as if he sensed someone had seen what shouldn't be seen. The guest who had picked up the paper lingered nearby, eyes darting, clearly aware of my presence. Every step I took felt dangerous, but I couldn't stop. I was already in too deep, already a witness to something that could change lives. I could feel the room closing in on me, the music, the laughter, the clinking of glasses, all of it, now a backdrop to the storm I had discovered. As I photographed a few more guests, I realized that everyone was unknowingly part of the story unfolding in the shadows. Each smile, each toast, each laugh was now tinged with unease, because I knew what they didn't. My camera had become a record of something larger than joy, something that could shatter the illusion of perfection. I could feel my hands shaking with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. The images were no longer just photographs, they were evidence. Proof that the story beneath the surface was far darker than anyone imagined. The moment of reckoning felt inevitable. I could see the father of the bride heading toward the balcony, and I knew I had to follow, had to document what happened next. My camera felt heavier in my hands, charged with the responsibility of capturing truth. I moved with deliberate calm, heart pounding, every nerve alert. I could hear the music and laughter behind me, but it was distant, almost unreal. What I was about to witness would change everything. And there was no turning back. That as I reached the balcony, I caught the guest with the paper once again. Their movements, quick and furtive. My shutter clicked without pause, capturing every detail, the angle of their body, the tension in their hands, the fleeting fear in their eyes. And then, in a moment that froze my entire being, I realized something impossible. The signature on the paper, the secret, the hidden truth, was connected to someone I never expected, someone familiar, someone close. I froze, my heart in my throat. The wedding, the celebration, the joy, everything had been a facade, and in that instant, I knew that my photographs were no longer just beautiful images for a client. They were a record of a truth so explosive, so shocking, that once revealed, nothing would ever be the same. My hands shook, my pulse thundered, and I realized that my life, and the lives of everyone at this wedding, had just been pulled into a story far bigger than anyone could imagine. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew one thing. I couldn't put the camera down. I couldn't ignore what I had seen. And even as the music swelled below, as the bride laughed and the guests cheered, I felt the weight of the secret pressing down, a heavy truth captured forever in the lens of my camera. I stayed hidden on the balcony, every muscle in my body tense, every breath shallow, as I watched the scene unfold below. The music from the reception drifted upward, soft and distant, like it belonged to someone else's life. Everything seemed normal, but I knew better. My camera was alive in my hands, recording details that no one else could notice, catching whispers and glances that would have gone unseen. And then, I saw it, the guest who had picked up the paper, slipping it into a small envelope, hands shaking, eyes darting to the father of the bride. That look, it was pure panic, like they had just realized the walls were closing in. I knew I had to get closer. Carefully, silently, I edged along the railing, heart hammering, every step calculated. The balcony was narrow, the drop below enough to make me hesitate, but the truth was pulling me forward stronger than fear. I lifted my camera, zooming in, focusing on the envelope, the trembling fingers, the darting eyes, and then I saw the father glance over his shoulder, lips moving in a whisper I couldn't hear, but the tension was unmistakable. Something terrible was about to happen. I could feel it. The guest made a sudden move, almost dropping the envelope, and the father's hand shot out, steadying it. But the exchange was quick. secretive, electric with danger. I clicked the shutter as fast as I could, knowing that one mistake could reveal me, that one step too far could put me in the middle of a confrontation I was not prepared for. But I couldn't stop. The story demanded to be told, the truth needed to be captured, and my hands were the only ones able to record it. Then, the moment I had feared, yet secretly anticipated, arrived. The father's gaze shifted sharply toward the balcony edge, where I stood. Time seemed to stretch, the world slowing, my pulse in my ears. As I realized he had seen me, for a heartbeat, everything froze. The fluttering of the bride's dress below, the laughter that suddenly seemed hollow, the soft clink of glasses. And then, he stepped closer, deliberate, imposing, as if measuring whether I belonged in the secret I had stumbled upon. My instincts screamed at me to retreat, to hide, to put down the camera, but I couldn't. I was already a witness, already entangled in a story that demanded exposure. I kept clicking, capturing every subtle gesture, every shift in expression, every whisper of tension between the two of them. My stomach churned, my hands shook, and a cold realization settled in. The secret wasn't just scandalous, it was dangerous. Lives could be ruined, reputations shattered, and I had become the unexpected keeper of it all. Suddenly, the father turned, motioning the guest away, and in that brief moment, my camera caught the impossible unmistakable detail on the document, a signature that made my blood run cold. It wasn't just any signature, it was familiar, shockingly familiar. My mind reeled, heart thudding against my ribs, as recognition hit me like a bolt of lightning. That signature belonged to someone I had known, someone I thought I understood, someone who had been part of my life in a way I never imagined would intersect with a wedding or a secret this enormous. I pressed my hands against the railing, trying to steady my breathing, as the guest hurried off toward the stairs, envelope clutched tightly, and the father followed, watching every step. My camera captured it all, the urgency, the fear, the silent understanding that they were hiding something massive. Every click was a heartbeat, a pulse, a confession frozen in time. I felt a tremor of panic, but also a rush of adrenaline, the awareness that what I had in my hands could change everything. I moved silently along the balcony, keeping them in view, focusing on every small detail. The father paused at the edge of the hall, peering down, and in that split second, he glanced upward. Our eyes met, and a chill ran down my spine. There was recognition there, but not the kind you welcome. It was cautious, calculating, wary. I felt exposed, vulnerable, but I couldn't back down. My camera was my shield, my witness, my only ally, and I knew that this encounter was the tipping point, the moment that could spiral into chaos or revelation. They disappeared from view for a moment, moving into a narrow corridor, and I followed silently, camera raised, recording shadows and movements that would have seemed meaningless to anyone else but were charged with hidden meaning. I felt like an intruder in someone else's life, yet I couldn't stop. The story demanded to be revealed, and the truth was dangling just beyond reach, teasing me with the promise of clarity and danger. And then, I saw it. The envelope opened just slightly, revealing a glimpse of the paper inside, the same signature I had recognized. My stomach twisted. I had to know more, had to understand the connection, had to see the story unfold fully. I edged closer, every nerve screaming at me, my eyes scanning the space, my camera capturing every every flicker of hesitation, every heartbeat of tension. Then, the father paused, looking back toward the grand hall where the celebration continued unaware, and I realized something that made my blood run cold. The secret wasn't just a mistake or a hidden truth, it was deliberate, calculated, a betrayal so deep that it could destroy not just a family, but a life, an identity, a future. I had stumbled into a web of deception and power, and the camera in my hands was the only thing holding the threads together, recording a story that everyone else was blind to. My pulse raced as the guests turned, finally noticing me. Panic flickered across their face, but the father raised a hand, signaling calm. In that tense silence, I understood that my presence had been acknowledged, that the secret knew me, and that the next moments would define everything. My hands trembled, my lens shaking slightly, but I pressed on, capturing it all. Every whisper, every glance, every movement of the envelope, the signature, the tension, it was all here, and there was no turning back. I felt the world tilt slightly, a dizzying sense of danger pressing in from all sides. As the guest and the father moved to a more secluded spot, the music below continued, oblivious. The laughter and clinking glasses creating a surreal contrast to the storm I was witnessing. I took a deep breath, realizing that this story had grown far beyond a wedding, far beyond a celebration. It was now a story of hidden truths, of secrets that could shatter lives, and I was at the center, capturing it all, powerless to intervene, yet unable to look away. And then, in a fleeting moment, the father looked directly at me again. His eyes were sharp, unreadable, but there was an unspoken message. He knew I had seen it, and he knew I had captured it. My stomach dropped. This was it, the tipping point, the edge of revelation. Everything that had seemed hidden was now exposed, even if only to me. My camera had become a key, a record, a silent witness to a story no one else would understand until the world saw it through my lens. I stayed there, frozen, watching, photographing, heart pounding, aware that in the next few minutes, everything would change. The secret was out of the shadows, hovering on the brink of revelation, and I was caught in its gravity. My hands shook, my breath came fast, and the realization hit me fully. This was the moment that could unravel everything, the climax of a story that had begun as a simple wedding shoot, and now threatened to explode into truth, scandal, and perhaps even danger. I couldn't breathe. Every sound around me, the faint music from the hall, the shuffle of shoes, the hushed murmurs felt distant, like it belonged to a world I no longer inhabited. All my focus was on them, on the father, on the guest, on the envelope with the signature that had sent a shiver through my entire being. I felt frozen, suspended in time, yet I knew I had to act, to capture every moment, even if it terrified me. My camera was glued to my hands, my lifeline, my only connection to the truth. They reached the small side room, dimly lit, shadows stretching across the walls. The father's hand lingered over the paper, the envelope trembling slightly under his grip, while the guests stared at him, panic etched across their face. And then, in the most shocking, heart-stopping moment, the guest spoke, though I couldn't hear the words. The expression, the desperation, told the story. The father's face changed too. I had never seen such a mixture of fear, anger, and regret painted on someone's features. It was raw, unfiltered, impossible to ignore. My fingers clicked the shutter faster than ever, capturing every micro-expression, every shift of emotion, every subtle gesture that revealed the weight of the secret between them. And then it happened, an involuntary movement, a slip of the hand, and the envelope fell slightly open. My eyes widened. I could see the contents clearly now, and my heart almost stopped. The signature, my father's. My father. The realization hit me like a wave crashing over a cliff, relentless and horrifying. I staggered back slightly, trying to process, trying to comprehend how this could be real. My father's signature, on a document that was here, in this room, in someone else's hands, tied to something so secret, so deliberate. I felt my stomach twist. This wasn't just a wedding scandal. This was personal. This was a betrayal that struck through my life, through my memories, through everything I thought I knew about my family. And yet, I was here, hidden, capturing it all, powerless to stop it, but aware that if this story came to light, it would destroy more than just reputations. The father noticed the envelope's tilt, snapping it shut with a sharp motion, and I could see the storm behind his eyes. He knew I had seen it. He knew that I had caught every detail on my camera. Panic surged through me. Should I flee? Should I confront? But I knew that any wrong move could end the story, or worse, put me in danger. The world outside that room was still celebrating, unaware, oblivious, while inside, a truth was unraveling that could shatter lives. I adjusted my lens, zooming in on the father's face, his jaw tightened, nostrils flaring slightly, eyes narrowing not just at the guest, but in a direction that I knew included me, even though he couldn't see me fully. There was an unspoken understanding that I had become part of this secret. My hands shook, but I continued snapping photos, heart pounding, adrenaline flooding every vein. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me, heavy, suffocating, undeniable. Then, the guest made a desperate movement, trying to conceal the envelope further, but the father's grip was firm, controlling, unyielding. My stomach dropped. The tension between them was electric, explosive. I could almost hear the words that weren't spoken, the accusations, the confessions, the desperation, and suddenly, the father's gaze snapped sharply to the door. My pulse raced. Was he aware of me? Could he sense my presence? Time slowed. My breath caught in my chest, and the room seemed to shrink around the intensity of the moment. Everything happened in rapid succession then. The father flipped the envelope open abruptly, revealing the document fully, and the guest's eyes widened in panic. Their hands shook violently, a futile attempt to reclaim control, while the father's expression was one of cold, piercing calculation. I clicked relentlessly, my camera capturing the raw, unbearable truth. My mind reeled. This wasn't just a hidden document. This wasn't just a mistake. This was deliberate, intentional, a betrayal so precise it could crush lives. And the signature was proof, undeniable and damning. I realized I was holding a witness to something catastrophic, something that would ripple far beyond this wedding, far beyond this room. I felt a surge of fear, a flash of anger, a pang of helplessness. What would I do with these images? Could I expose it? Should I? The moral weight pressed down on me, yet the truth demanded to be seen. I was frozen between fear and duty, trembling yet unwavering. Suddenly, a sharp sound, footsteps outside the door. The father's head snapped toward the noise, alert, tense. The guest froze, eyes wide with terror, and my own pulse thundered in my ears. Someone was coming. The moment was teetering on the edge of revelation and disaster. I could barely breathe. If they discovered me now, if they realized my presence, everything could spiral out of control. My heart raced uncontrollably as the door creaked open slightly, and in that instant, I understood that nothing would ever be the same. The secret, the document, my father's signature, it was all exposed to my lens, but not to the world yet. I had become the keeper of a truth that was heavier than anything I had ever faced. My hands shook, my vision blurred slightly, but I couldn't look away. Every moment was a razor's edge, cutting through certainty and innocence alike. The father finally turned fully to the guest, voiced low, controlled, sharp, but I could feel the threat behind it. I could sense the danger in the air, the power imbalance, the fear that had been building like a storm cloud over this quiet wedding hall. I pressed on, my camera a barrier, my shield, my record, capturing the climactic unraveling of a life I thought I knew. And then, as I leaned closer, trying to hold my breath, I realized something chilling. The next moments would change everything, not just for me, but for everyone involved. I stayed there, frozen, heart hammering, camera raised, waiting, recording, knowing that the tipping point was here. Everything was about to be revealed, and I was the only one who had a clear view. The only one who could tell the story in its full, raw truth. My mind raced with the possibilities, with the consequences, with the irreversible impact of what I had witnessed. This was the climax, the moment when the world of perfection at a wedding collided violently with hidden truths, secrets, and betrayals, and I was caught right at the center of it all. I stepped back slowly, lowering my camera but not letting my eyes leave the father and the guest. The room felt impossibly still, heavy with a tension that was almost unbearable. The envelope was closed now, the secret temporarily concealed, but my hands still shook. I could feel the adrenaline fading, leaving behind a deep, gnawing exhaustion that weighed on my chest like a stone. My mind raced, trying to process everything I had just witnessed. My father's signature, the betrayal, the power he wielded in that quiet room, it was overwhelming. I felt a mix of disbelief, anger, and heartbreak all at once. I slowly inched toward the doorway, my camera still clutched in my hands as though it were a lifeline. Every step felt fragile, as if the floor could collapse beneath me and the entire truth would vanish with it. The sounds of the wedding outside, a soft laugh, clinking glasses, the faint music felt surreal, like a different world that had no connection to the storm I had just witnessed. It was a jarring contrast, and it made the reality of what I had seen even more unbearable. I retreated to a quiet corner, pressing my back against the wall, trying to steady my racing heart. My mind kept replaying the moment, over and over: the father's cold gaze, the guest's panic, the signature that would haunt me forever. I realized then that this story was bigger than any one wedding, bigger than me. It wasn't just about a secret, a hidden betrayal, or even a father's indiscretions. It was about power, control, and the ways that people can manipulate truth without anyone ever noticing. And I had seen it all, had captured it all, and now carried a weight that was almost too much to bear. The realization hit me like a wave. I had a choice. I could ignore what I had seen, pretend it never happened, and protect myself from the fallout. Or I could speak, Share the truth. Let the world see what had been hidden behind smiles and champagne. My fingers tightened around my camera. It wasn't just a tool, it was proof. A record of everything, a way to make the invisible visible. I felt a surge of courage mixed with fear. The path ahead was uncertain, and I knew there would be consequences. But I also knew that some truths were too important to hide. Hours passed, though I couldn't tell exactly how many. The wedding continued, oblivious, and I stayed in the shadows, replaying every image I had captured in my mind. Each photograph was a story, each frame a confession, frozen in time. I realized that I could never look at weddings the same way again. Every smile, every handshake, every joyful tear would carry with it the weight of secrets, betrayals, and choices made behind closed doors. The world felt different, harsher, yet more real than I had ever known. Eventually, I left the hall quietly, slipping out into the night. The cool air hit my face, and for the first time in hours, I breathed deeply. The stars above felt distant and cold, but somehow comforting in their constancy. I walked slowly, my camera safe in my bag, my mind still churning. I thought about the father, about the guest, about the lives that would never be the same, and about the truth that I now held. The burden was heavy, but it was mine to carry, and I knew I couldn't let it go unheard. As I walked home, I thought about what I would do next. Sharing the story could change everything, not just for those involved, but for anyone who had ever been silenced, overlooked, or manipulated by secrets. I felt a responsibility that I had never felt before. I had always seen myself as just a photographer, capturing moments for others, but now I realized that sometimes a camera could do more than record, it could reveal, expose, and demand accountability. By the time I reached my apartment, the city lights blurred behind my tired eyes. I sat on the edge of my bed, camera in hand, and stared at the images one more time. Each click of the shutter was a heartbeat, each captured frame a whisper of truth that refused to be hidden. I understood then that my life had changed forever, that I could no longer be the same person who walked into that wedding hall earlier that day. The innocence of witnessing celebrations without knowing the shadows behind them was gone. I had seen too much, and I would carry it with me always. And yet, amidst the fear and the despair, I felt a strange sense of hope. The truth I had captured had power. It had the potential to change minds, to open eyes, to remind people that the world was not always as perfect as it seemed. My father's signature, the guests' panic, the quiet despair behind forced smiles, these were not just photographs, they were evidence, a testament to reality that could no longer be denied. I realized that the truth, once seen, could never be unseen. And in that knowledge, there was strength. As I lay in bed that night, I wondered how many other weddings, other celebrations, hid secrets beneath their gleaming surfaces. How many lives were controlled by power, fear, and deception, invisible to the world. And I knew that I had been given a rare opportunity to witness, to record, to tell. My camera had captured more than just images. It had captured the essence of truth itself. I closed my eyes, exhausted but determined. I knew that the days ahead would be difficult, that decisions I made could have far-reaching consequences. But I also knew that I couldn't turn away. I had to tell the story, share what I had seen, even if it terrified me. The truth was too important to remain hidden, and I had been entrusted with it. And in that responsibility, I found a clarity I had never felt before. The next morning, as I reviewed the images again, I realized that the secret would not remain buried. The wedding would be remembered not just for its celebration, but for the revelations captured in silence by someone who had witnessed everything without being seen. And I, Alec Rose, would carry that story forward, knowing that sometimes the most shocking moments happen behind the brightest smiles, and the truth is often hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone brave enough to reveal it. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing with certainty. The camera had not lied, the images had not betrayed, and I would not be silent. The world needed to see what I had seen, to confront what had been hidden, and to acknowledge that even in moments of joy, darkness could lurk quietly, patiently, and relentlessly, and I had captured it all.